Nobody saw it coming. Not the beat reporters who cover this team every single day. Not the analysts who spend hours dissecting every roster move, every transaction wire, every whisper that leaks out of the organization. Not even the players themselves, the ones who share a clubhouse, who sit next to each other in the dugout, who notice when something is shifting before it ever becomes official. Nobody saw it coming. And then, in the space of a single afternoon, the Dodgers announced 4 roster decisions that changed the shape of this team in ways that will take days, maybe weeks, to fully understand. Eduardo Espinal is gone. Miguel Rojas received news that nobody in that locker room wanted to hear. 3 players were removed from the 40-man roster in one move. And in the middle of all of it, standing at the center of a story that keeps finding ways to pull him in, was Shohei Ohtani, whose reaction to everything that happened today was not what anyone expected. Not even close. Let's start with what everyone is talking about first. Edman is coming back. Tommy Edman's return has been one of the most watched storylines in the Dodgers season. Not because of the drama surrounding it. Because of what it means for the lineup. Because of what it means for the defense. Because of what it means for a team that has been operating without one of its most important connective pieces for longer than anyone inside the organization is comfortable admitting. Tomorrow. That is the word coming out of the Dodgers camp. Not next week. Not after the next series. Tomorrow. The moment that word was confirmed, the energy inside the facility changed. Players who heard it in passing, through a phone notification, through a conversation near the batting cages, through the specific look on a coach's face that tells you something real just happened, reacted with the kind of relief that only comes when you've been waiting for something long enough that you stopped letting yourself believe it was close. Edman back in that lineup changes the calculus of this team immediately. His presence in the field. His ability to be where the ball is going before the ball knows it's going there. His at-bats against right-handed pitching that have quietly been one of the most undervalued parts of what the Dodgers do offensively. He's coming back tomorrow. But that was only the first announcement. Eduardo Espinal will not be a Dodger when Edman returns. The timing of that decision, Edman in, Espinal out, is not coincidental. Rosters are not shaped by accident. Every addition creates a pressure somewhere else on the 40-man, and the Dodgers front office has been balancing that pressure for weeks. When Edman's return became a certainty rather than a possibility, the math shifted. And Espinal, who had carved out his role with a consistency that earned him genuine respect inside the clubhouse, found himself on the wrong side of that math. He is moving to a new team. The destination has been confirmed. The transaction is done. Espinal, who arrived in Los Angeles without the fanfare that surrounds most Dodgers acquisitions, leaves having done everything that was asked of him. Every single time. That is not a small thing. In a roster as deep and as demanding as the Dodgers, doing everything asked of you, without complaint, without creating noise, without making the front office manage your feelings alongside your performance, is its own kind of achievement. And Espinal did it. Which is why what happened next made the story even harder to close cleanly. Before he left, Espinal found Otani. Not in a press conference setting. Not in front of cameras. In the facility. Quietly. The way these things happen when a player understands that the public version of a goodbye is not the real one. The real one happens in a hallway, or near a locker, or in a moment that most people in the building don't even notice until after it's already over. Espinal said goodbye to Otani directly. Those who were nearby described it as brief. Not cold, the opposite of cold. But brief in the way that things are brief when the emotion underneath them is large enough that keeping it short is the only way to keep it together. And then came Otani's reaction. Which was not what anyone expected. Otani, who carries himself with a specific stillness in public settings, who lets his performance do the loudest speaking, who rarely gives the room more than what the moment strictly requires, did something that caught the people nearby off guard. He didn't offer a handshake and a nod. He didn't give the kind of professional, measured farewell that the moment would have allowed him to give. He stopped. He looked at Espinal directly. And he spoke. In Japanese first. Then, slowly, in English. Those who heard it said the words were simple. But the way he said them, the weight he put behind them, the time he took, the fact that he said them at all, communicated something that went beyond the transaction that had just happened. Otani does not do that with everyone. The people in that building know that. Which is why the ones who saw it understood immediately that what they were watching was not a routine farewell between teammates. It was Otani telling Espinal, in the clearest way he knows how, that what he brought to this team was seen. Was valued. Was not just a line in a box score or a fielding percentage on a stats sheet. Was seen. The room was a little quieter after that. Not the sad quiet of a team that has lost something it cannot recover from. The different quiet. The kind that follows a moment that reminded everyone in the building, coaches, staff, players sitting at their lockers pretending not to have noticed, what this is all for. And then the next announcement came. 3 players removed from the 40-man roster. In any other week, that move alone would have been the headline. 3 players. Gone from the protected roster in a single transaction. That is not a minor adjustment. That is a front office sending a signal about where this organization is going and who they believe will be part of getting there. The names matter. Not because removing them is a statement about their talent. The 40-man roster is not a Hall of Fame ballot. Players move on and off it throughout the season for reasons that are often more logistical than evaluative. But the timing of these 3 removals, on the same day as Espinal's departure, on the eve of Edman's return, in the middle of a week that has already produced more organizational news than most teams see in a month, gives the moves a weight they might not have carried on a quieter afternoon. The Dodgers are reshaping. Not dramatically. Not in the way that signals panic or a change in direction. But with the specific, deliberate precision of a front office that knows exactly where it is trying to go and is removing whatever stands between the current roster and that destination. 3 players off the 40-man. Edman back tomorrow. The shape of this team is changing in real time. And then the news about Miguel Rojas. This one landed differently. Rojas is not a peripheral figure in the Dodgers story. He is not a player who exists on the edges of the roster, whose presence or absence barely registers in the day-to-day rhythm of the clubhouse. He is the kind of player that locker rooms are built around. Not because of his statistics, though those have earned him his place, but because of what he represents inside the room. The standard he carries without making it a speech. The way younger players watch him without him knowing they're watching. The news he received today was not good. The details, as they have come out, paint a picture that nobody inside the organization wanted to be looking at. This is not a minor setback. This is not the kind of news that gets followed immediately by a recovery timeline and a return date. This is the kind of news that asks harder questions. About the season. About what comes next. About what the Dodgers do with a roster gap that cannot simply be filled by a transaction. Rojas received the news with the composure of someone who has been in professional baseball long enough to understand that some moments require you to be still before you can decide what to do next. The players who were around him described the atmosphere afterward as heavy. Not broken. Not panicked. But heavy in the specific way that follows real news about someone that a group of people genuinely cares about. This was not just a roster update. This was something that touched the room. Dave Roberts addressed the media with the careful, measured delivery of a manager who is trying to be honest without being dramatic. He has been doing this long enough to know that the words he chooses in a press conference become the tone that the team carries into the next 24 hours. He cannot afford to be reckless with them. He was asked about Rojas first. He took a breath. Placed both hands flat on the table in front of him. And when he spoke, his voice was lower than usual. Miguel is one of the most important people in this organization, he said. Not just on the field. In every way that matters for a team that wants to win games and be something worth being part of. We're going to support him in every way we can. He paused there. Long enough that the room stayed quiet, waiting. The baseball side of this will figure itself out. That's not what we're focused on right now. A reporter asked about the 3 roster removals. Roberts nodded slightly. He seemed almost relieved to answer a more logistical question. Those decisions were made with the full picture in mind, he said. Where we are right now. Where we're going. We're not making moves to make moves. Every decision has a reason. Then came the question about Otani. About what happened with Espinal. About what people in the building saw and described afterward. Roberts smiled. Briefly. Not the press conference smile that managers produce automatically. A real one. I'll say this, he said. Shohei understands this game better than most people give him credit for. And I don't mean the pitching or the hitting. I mean the human side of it. The part that keeps a team together when things get complicated. He didn't say anything else about it. He didn't need to. By the time the afternoon press availability ended, the Dodgers had moved through more organizational news in one day than most teams process in a month. A return. A departure. 3 roster cuts. A piece of news about one of their most beloved players that nobody wanted to receive. And a moment between 2 teammates that most of the building quietly witnessed and none of them will forget quickly. Edman comes back tomorrow. Espinal heads somewhere new, carrying the knowledge that in this city, in this organization, what he did was seen. 3 players begin the process of figuring out what comes next. Rojas faces something harder than a baseball question. And Otani, who could have let the afternoon pass with the quiet professionalism that he always brings, who could have stayed in his lane and kept his focus forward, stopped. And spoke. And made one person in that building feel, on the hardest day of his time as a Dodger, that none of it had gone unnoticed. That is not in the box score. It never will be. But anyone who was in that building today knows exactly what it was worth.